I built my whole life around one promise: to help my family. But when helping became surviving, I realized maybe the only person I never saved was myself. You would not think a 7-year-old kid could carry the weight of a whole family on his back, but I did. Or at least, I thought I could. I remember sitting cross-legged on the worn-out carpet in our living room, our old heater rattling in the corner like it was coughing up its last breath. My little sister had fallen asleep on the couch with her head buried under a blanket, and Mom was passed out at the kitchen table again, an unopened stack of bills crumpled beneath her elbow. That night, something in me snapped, but not in a loud way. It was quiet, heavy, like a promise made in the middle of a storm. I told myself, right then and there, when I grow up, I am going to fix this. I did not know what this meant exactly. I just knew I hated the silence that followed every shut-off notice. I hated the way my dad's name was a ghost in the house. I hated how he always had to act like we were doing fine when everything was falling apart behind the front door. So I made a vow. I was going to make it. I was going to make enough money, enough security, enough everything to pull my family out of the mess we had always lived in. I would buy Mom a house. I would send my sister to college. I would make them proud. And I would do it without needing anybody's help. That promise became the compass for everything I did. Every after-school job, every scholarship application. Every night, I stayed up studying while my friends were out living their lives. Even when I got older, when people started talking about dreams like art or travel or finding yourself, I never entertained any of that. I did not have time to find myself. I already knew what I was: a lifeboat. The only one we had. I kept it to myself for years. No one ever asked me why I worked so hard. They just saw the results and clapped. Teachers, neighbors, even Mom. "He is going to make it," they would say. "He is the one who is going to save them." Them. Never himself. And maybe that should have been a sign. Maybe I should have realized that they were more in love with the version of me that provided than the person I actually was. But when you grow up needing to be needed, it feels like love. It feels like purpose. Still, back then, it never occurred to me that saving them might cost me everything else. But the cracks were already forming. I just did not know where to look. And by the time I saw what was happening, it was almost too late. Because here is the part nobody talks about. Sometimes the people you are trying to save never wanted to be rescued in the first place. I graduated high school with honors. Not because I was some genius, but because failure never felt like an option. I had that promise burned into the back of my mind. Make it, save them. That was the plan. That was all I had. College was not some magical experience for me. It was survival with a smile. I picked business over writing, even though deep down, I wanted to tell stories. Real ones. I used to fill notebooks with pages of characters and wild plot twists, but I tossed all that aside the minute I realized you could not pay rent with dreams. So I studied finance. Took on a double major. Worked nights at a warehouse and weekends at a diner, saving every cent. My friends joked that I had the hustle gene, but they did not see the spreadsheets I kept for my mom's bills. The times I skipped meals just to stretch my gas money. The phone calls from my sister asking for help with books or tuition deposits that could not wait. And every time I sent money back home, I felt good, needed, like I was delivering on that old promise, brick by brick. When my mom's car broke down, I paid for it. When the roof leaked, I covered that too. Christmas? Always on me. Birthdays? On me. I told myself this was what success looked like, being the reliable one. The backbone. Then came the job. Straight out of college, I landed a solid role at a growing tech firm. Benefits, steady pay, even a 401k. It was not glamorous, but it was stable. And more importantly, it let me keep giving. I moved into a tiny apartment, drove a 10-year-old car, and kept my wardrobe simple. Meanwhile, I helped my mom pay off her credit card debt, put a down payment on a used car for my sister. When she got married young to some guy who barely kept a job, I paid for half the wedding just to keep the peace. Every time they needed something, I stepped up. It did not matter that I skipped vacations, worked holidays, or passed on every promotion that would have required relocation. They always had a reason why I could not move too far. My sister had a baby and needed help. Mom had a minor health scare. My cousin was getting out of rehab and needed a place to crash. There was always something. And I told myself this was love. This was what being a good son and brother meant. But slowly, it started to feel different. Like I was not just giving out of love anymore, but out of fear. Fear that if I stopped, they would fall apart. Fear that if I said no, I would lose whatever small piece of connection we still had. And maybe the worst fear of all, that without them needing me, I might not know who I was anymore. But I kept going, kept giving, until one day, a new opportunity showed up. And that was the first time I realized I had no idea what I wanted for me. Because everything I had built so far, it was never really for me. I was sitting at my desk, half listening to a budget meeting, when I saw the email. Subject line, VP position, relocation required. I stared at it like it was a joke. I had been with the company for over 8 years. I never really chased titles, but I worked hard. I showed up when no one else would. I fixed messes quietly. I made other people look good. So when they told me I was being considered for a vice president role, I actually laughed under my breath. The offer came with everything. Almost double my current salary, a relocation package, and, for the first time in forever, the freedom to build something of my own. Not for my family. Not to patch up someone else's life. Just for me. There was only one catch. It was in Seattle. Over 2,000 miles from my hometown. From my mother. From my sister and her 2 kids. From everything I had been holding up like a damn human crutch. My heart raced as I read the details. It felt like the door I had been waiting to see open for years. And right behind that door, guilt. Pure, pounding, soul-draining guilt. Because I already knew what was coming. Before I told anyone. Before I even accepted. The minute I mentioned moving, my mom would start talking about her health, how she needed someone nearby. My sister would mention the kids, how hard it had been since her husband lost his job again. Even my aunt, who had not texted me in 6 months, would probably chime in with some sudden emergency or need for support. That is how it always worked. The second I got an inch for myself, someone tugged on it. And deep down, I was scared. Scared that if I left, if I really went off and lived for me, they would say I abandoned them. That I was selfish. That after everything, I had just up and walked away. But another part of me, the quieter part, the tired part, was whispering something else. It asked, what about you? What about the dreams I never chased? The nights I spent fixing someone else's chaos instead of building my own life? What about all the birthdays I missed? All the relationships I let fizzle out because I was too wrapped up in saving everyone else? I closed my laptop that night and sat in the dark for a long time. That opportunity was not just a job. It was a mirror. And what I saw staring back at me was someone who had spent his whole life being the hero in everyone else's story, but never once stopped to write his own. I told them the next evening, over dinner at my sister's house. Mom was sitting at the end of the table, half listening to the grandkids scream over a game in the next room. My sister was ranting about the power bill again, how things were tight, how Jeff just needs a little more time to find something steady. I waited for a pause. Then I said it. I was offered a promotion. Big one. I would have to move to Seattle. Silence. Mom's fork paused midair. My sister blinked, like I had spoken in another language. Even Jeff looked up from his phone for once. At first, nobody said anything. Then Mom let out this long sigh, the kind that always came before a guilt trip. She said, well, I suppose that is wonderful news for you. And that was it. Just 5 words, each one soaked in disappointment. My sister jumped in right after, asking who would help with the kids when school started, who would take Mom to her doctor appointments, who would show up for Sunday dinners. She listed it all like it was a checklist titled, Reasons You Cannot Leave. Jeff mumbled something about how Seattle is expensive and people change when they move away. No one said they were happy for me. No one asked what the job was. No one even asked if I wanted it. They just reacted to how it would affect them. And that was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, but deep. Because suddenly, all the years came rushing back. The birthdays I paid for. The rent I covered. The times I stayed up late helping my sister figure out bills while Jeff played video games in the other room. The weeks I took off work to sit with Mom in the ER. The nights I drove across town because somebody's car died, again. I had done it all. Willingly. Quietly. Without keeping score. But in that moment, I realized something awful. They never saw it as generosity. They saw it as obligation. Like I owed them this life I had built. Like my success was their safety net, and my happiness was just collateral. I left dinner early that night. Told them I needed to think. But honestly, the decision was already clawing its way up from inside me. The problem was, I was starting to wonder if they loved me, or if they just loved what I could do for them. A few days passed. I did not bring it up again, and neither did they. But the tension was there, sharp, heavy, waiting to pounce. Then one night, I stopped by Mom's place to drop off a few groceries. She was sitting in her recliner, watching one of those old reality shows she always pretended to hate but never missed. I was halfway to the kitchen when I heard her talking on the phone. She must have thought I was still outside. She was on speaker. I heard my sister's voice, tired and hushed. And then Mom said it. He is going through some phase. You know how he is. Always chasing something. I stood frozen, one hand on a grocery bag, my stomach tightening. Then she added, he will get over it. He always comes back. My sister laughed, soft but sharp. I hope so. I do not know what we are going to do if he really leaves. Mom said, he will not. He needs us too much to be out there alone. It felt like someone had cracked my ribs open. Not because they doubted me, but because deep down, they were not afraid I would fail. They were afraid I might succeed. That I might build a life so good, I would never come back. I did not say anything. I set the groceries down, left quietly, and drove around for an hour with the windows down, trying to get the air back in my lungs. And somewhere between stoplights, it all hit me. They were not clinging to me out of love. They were clinging to control. All this time, I thought I was saving them. But maybe they were the ones keeping me stuck. Not maliciously, not with open cruelty, but with something worse. Expectation dressed up as love. That realization hit hard. Because when you spend your whole life being the rock, you start to believe it is the only thing you are good for. You forget you are allowed to change, to want more, to walk away. I had spent years building a version of myself that made sense to them. Reliable, predictable, available. But that guy? He was tired. And the more I looked at that job offer sitting in my inbox, the more I realized something that scared the hell out of me. Maybe I wanted to be someone else now. Not their fixer, not their fallback, just me. But that meant doing something I had never done before. Letting go. 2 weeks before I was supposed to give my final answer to the company, I got the call. It was my sister, crying. Mom fell, she said. In the kitchen. She's in a lot of pain. Can you come? I did not even think. I grabbed my keys and left work without clocking out. Rushed through traffic like I was chasing time itself. My chest was tight the whole drive. I kept imagining Mom laid out on the floor, helpless, maybe worse. But when I got there, she was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. She smiled when I walked in. I'm all right. Just twisted my ankle a little. You didn't have to rush like that. My sister was in the kitchen, making coffee. No urgency. No stress. She looked surprised to see me so out of breath. I asked what happened. She said Mom slipped a little while reaching for the pantry. It scared us, she said. Better safe than sorry, right? That is when I noticed something strange. There was no ice pack. No brace. No limp. Mom stood up just fine when she went to get more sugar for her tea. I asked if they had called a doctor. My sister shrugged. We were going to, but she seemed fine. We figured we would wait and see. It was not an emergency. Not even close. I stood there, trying to process what was really happening. That familiar ache in my chest came back. But this time, it was not concern. It was clarity. They knew I was pulling away. They felt it. And they were testing the cord, seeing if I would still come running. And I did. Because deep down, I still wanted to be needed. But now, I also wanted something else, freedom. I left early that night. Told them I had work in the morning. But the truth was, I just could not stay there another second. Not with the quiet knowing that they had pulled the fire alarm just to keep me in the building. Driving home, I kept thinking, what happens when they cannot use guilt anymore? What happens when I stop answering the calls? When I stop putting their comfort above my peace? What happens when the lifeboat finally lets go? A few nights later, I met up with an old friend from college, Marcus. We had not seen each other in years, but he was in town for a conference and invited me out for drinks. We talked about everything. Work. Life. That one time we almost got kicked out of our dorm for grilling hot dogs on a clothes iron. Eventually, he leaned in and asked, "So what about you? You happy?" That question hit harder than it should have. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. Marcus kept talking. Said he remembered how driven I used to be. How I was the guy with plans. The guy who carried himself like he already knew where he was going. I always figured you'd start your own company or vanish to Europe chasing something wild, he said. But you kinda disappeared. Like you got stuck somewhere. I shrugged. Told him I had responsibilities. Family. Stability. All the grown-up stuff. He just looked at me and said, "Yeah, but at what cost?" That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about that question. At what cost? Because I had given everything, my time, my energy, my 20s, to holding other people up, to proving I was good, useful, reliable. But here is the part that stung. No one ever asked what I needed. Not once. Not when I skipped vacations to stay close in case something came up. Not when I turned down a trip to Mexico with friends because mom's roof might need repairs. Not when I helped pay off my sister's car after she rear-ended someone and blamed the brakes. They took it all, piece by piece. And I let them. Because deep down, I believed love looked like sacrifice. But now, I was starting to wonder, if love that only survives when you are sacrificing everything, is that even love? Or is it just survival for everyone else? And if I kept going this way, kept ignoring the growing emptiness in my own life, who would save me? I drafted the email that night. Not the one to my family, the one to the company. I accepted the promotion. I stared at that send button for nearly 20 minutes. My hands were shaking, not from doubt, but from all the years I had told myself I could not do this, that I was all they had, that leaving would break them. But this time, I finally asked something different. What if staying keeps breaking me? I hit send, and for the first time in years, I felt something that almost scared me, relief. I did not tell anyone for a few days. I just walked through life a little differently. I was quieter, calmer, focused. Every step I took felt like I was walking out of someone else's story and into my own. Then my sister showed up at my place, unannounced. The kids were in the back seat, and she had that look, like she was about to drop another problem on my doorstep. She sat down and said she had heard I was seriously considering the move. Her voice was low, like she was giving me space to deny it. I told her the truth. I already said yes. I leave in 3 weeks. She stared at me like I had just said I was moving to the moon. Then came the real blow. But what about us? She asked. What about Mom? What about the kids? I wanted to scream. Not because she asked, but because she meant it. Like I had not already spent years pouring my life into them. But I just looked her in the eye and said, I am tired, Sarah. I cannot keep being everything for everyone. I need to live, too. She sat back like she had been slapped. Then she said it. The sentence that had been lurking just under the surface for years. So, you're just leaving us? That was the moment I knew. She was never going to see it any other way. No matter how much I had given. No matter how much I had sacrificed. To her, and maybe to all of them, I was not a person. I was a function. A ride when they needed one. A wallet when things got tight. A warm body to show up when no one else would. And now that I was choosing me, suddenly I was abandoning them? I walked her to the door. No yelling. No fighting. Just silence. As she pulled away, her daughter waved at me from the back seat. That crushed me. I love those kids. Still do. But sometimes, love means leaving. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself. The day I told my mom, it rained hard. The kind of rain that makes the world feel quieter, like it is holding its breath. She was sitting at the kitchen table, same spot she always claimed, fiddling with a half-done crossword and a cup of tea gone cold. I stood there for a while, watching her. Part of me hoped she might guess what I came to say, spare me from having to say it. But she just looked up and said, You look tired. I nodded. I am. Then I told her. I said the move was real. The job was real. I had a place lined up. My last day at work here was already scheduled. She sat still for a long time. Then she asked, Why now? That was the question, wasn't it? I told her it was not just about the job. It was not even about the city. It was about me. About who I used to be, and who I never got to become. She nodded slowly. Then she asked something else. Is this really what you want? I thought about lying. About softening it. About turning it into a maybe or a probably. But I said yes. For once, it really is. Her eyes shifted. And then she said something I did not expect. I always knew you would leave one day. It was not angry. It was not even sad. Just tired. Maybe even a little proud. But also something else. Something that felt like quiet fear. She added, You were never meant for this town. Or this life. But I hoped we could keep you anyway. That hurt more than anything else. Because it was honest. She knew I had built my whole life around staying, around helping, but she never stopped hoping I would stay longer. Just until the next problem. The next storm. The next crisis. That was the moment I realized. They were never going to tell me to go. They were never going to say, You have done enough. Or thank you. Now go build your life. Because deep down, they did not want me to have a life outside of them. That was not cruelty. That was survival. But now it was time to stop surviving and start living. I stood up, kissed her on the forehead, and told her I would call when I landed in Seattle. She nodded. Neither of us said goodbye, but something told me we both knew it was happening anyway. The flight to Seattle left on a Thursday morning. I packed everything into 2 suitcases and a worn-out backpack. No going-away party. No big send-off. My sister texted me a long message the night before, half guilt, half silence. I did not respond. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left to explain. Mom did not call. I was not surprised. She loved me, I know that. But some love only exists in the version of you that stays close, stays small, stays safe. And I was not that version anymore. As the plane took off, I stared out the window. The sky cracked open with sunlight, clouds shifting like pieces of a life I had carried too long. And I thought about who I had been. The kid who made a promise in a quiet, broken home. The young man who gave and gave, until he forgot what it meant to receive. The man who built a life entirely for others, until he realized he had none left for himself. In Seattle, I hit the ground running. The new job was intense, but for the first time, I felt challenged in a way that was mine. I rented a small apartment near the water. It was not much, but it was mine. I started cooking again, reading, going for walks without checking my phone every 10 minutes in case someone needed something. And here is the part no one tells you. When you finally stop being the savior, the silence feels unbearable at first, like something important went missing. But then, it starts to feel like peace. A few weeks later, my niece called. Not her mom. Not my mom. Just her. She asked if I was okay, if I missed home. I told her yes and no. And then she said something I will never forget. I always thought you were like a superhero, but I think superheroes get tired, too. That one sentence shattered me. In the best way, because she saw it. She got it. Maybe one day, the rest of them will, too. But even if they do not, I finally do. I was never just their provider, or their fixer, or their fallback plan. I am a man who gave everything he had, until he realized that love does not mean losing yourself. So no, I did not abandon them. I just finally chose me. And for the first time in my life, I am not sorry.